Welcome to the Norris Group Real Estate Podcast, a show committed to bringing you insights from thought leaders shaping the real estate industry. In each episode, we'll dive into conversations with industry experts and local insiders, all aimed at helping you thrive in an ever-changing real estate market, continuing the legacy that Bruce Norris created, sharing valuable knowledge, and empowering you on your real estate journey. Whether you're a seasoned pro or a newcomer, this is your go-to source for insider tips, market trends, and success strategies. Here's your host, Craig Evans. The Norris Group proudly presents I Survived Real Estate. Industry experts discuss evolving industry trends, real estate bubbles, inflation, and opportunities emerging for real estate professionals. We want to thank our platinum partners, UDirect IRA Services, San Diego Creative Investors Association, White Feather Investments, MVT Productions, Inland Empire Real Estate Investment Club, and Realty 411 Magazine. See isurvivedrealestate.com for event details, information on all our generous sponsors, and to connect with our speakers.
Welcome, everybody. This is Joey with the Norris Group. With me today is Craig Evans, our CEO. We're here today. We're actually going to put this out 2 days early because it's been a rough couple of weeks for our friends and folks in Florida. And now we have another hurricane bearing down on the Gulf side, the west coast of Florida. And right now, while it doesn't look like it's going to directly hit us where we built and where we are all with our boot camp folks, there is some urgency, because we wanted to get you guys an update from people on the ground. I've spoken to Joanna, our property manager, and I'll get into some of the things that she's doing to get ahead of this and prepare our renters and our tenants and our rental homes that are down there. But wanted to get information because we've had over 175 investors come to our boot camp. Not all of them have built with us. Many did, but there's also a lot of them that built with other builders, other bought existing. And then there's people who didn't even come to the boot camp. But, a lot of times when Bruce does something, a lot of folks follow. So Craig, I want to touch a little, first of all, thank you for being on. I know it's a rough, kind of couple of days, last couple of days, really hectic for you, your family, being the leader of your company too, trying to make sure your people are safe and make all the preparations that you need. So I really appreciate you being on. Welcome to the show as a guest.
It's been a while since I've been on here as a guest again.
So I want to talk about a little bit about, our experience that we went through just 2 years ago with Ian. Now, this was a Cat 5 that hit directly into Fort Myers and Cape Coral. Can you talk a little bit about what those sustained winds and, what those few days were before it came? I know there was $113 billion worth of damage, and it was mostly surge, but I'll let you talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, we, Ian was one of those storms. It was just kind of an unforeseen thing of how, first how it turned and came in on us and the size and scope of that storm, much like what Helene has turned into for Florida, but even for more so for friends and family in North Carolina and Western North Carolina and the things that they're experiencing now. But Ian, there's a lot going on with Ian because, it was only classified as a class or as a level 4 storm, for category 4 storm through FEMA. The reality is that storm was a category 5. We had sustained winds over 200 miles an hour at my house. We've got sustained winds at several locations that are documentable as a class or as a category 5 storm. But the old saying, you hide from the wind and you run from the water is really kind of true. The wind is a lot of stuff you can you're going to lose some shingles. You're going to, maybe you've got a water system tank that blows off or something. Those things can be replaced very easily. The water is the thing that is so damaging. Fort Myers Beach, we had right at almost 19 feet of storm surge. When you've got almost a 20-foot wall of water coming in, those are things that just become devastating, because it's not just the pressure, it's the salt and what the salt then does to everything. So there's a lot of things that come out of that type of storm surge,
And not to help it, there was a lot of old buildings in Fort Myers Beach, right?
Yeah, Fort Myers Beach had stuff, going back to 50s and 60s that were built on it, and there was just a lot of structure that really, first big storm it was going. There's been a lot of redevelopment going on in Fort Myers Beach. Again, there's a lot of opinions on what that's doing to the beach, but the reality is, Fort Myers Beach will never be what it was in the aspect of the old cottages and things like that. But the reality is it needed to be something different for safety of structure and life safety, things like that. The reality is we've got too much good technology to be able to build quality structures and things that can sustain storm surge and wind levels and things like that to sustain life now. So there's a lot of good stuff going on Fort Myers Beach, and it is definitely coming back strong. Been some new developments that have opened down there, so a lot of good things happening there. But obviously, Helene came through last week. We had I think 3 feet of water down on, maybe 4 feet of water down on Fort Myers Beach in some areas. Those are tough things, but most of the stuff that was back up and running is stuff that was kind of grandfathered into some of the stuff and would be some of the commercial properties, things like that. And the reality is they're built and they're used to and ready to let that happen, let the water flow through, they clean up and they get back to going again. And but when you've got 4 feet of water coming 1 week and then, a week and a half later, all of a sudden you're dealing with the same potential thing coming through again. It's frustrating and a lot of things going on. So,
yeah. One of the prettiest places I've ever visited is Sanibel Island. And that during Ian, the whole island was wiped out. There was, no services, the causeway went down.
Yep.
I remember stories of you taking your boat and actually rescuing people, getting them off the island, bringing them back to the shores. We had our boot camp the following year in 2023 in April. And it's amazing to me the speed and the action that Florida takes to recover and how people come together to just get back to normal or back to as close to normal as you can. We were just there 6 short months afterwards, and I went to Sanibel, and there was just tons of construction. There was people on the island. The causeway was back up, and it was just amazing.
Well, what I was going to say is, there was a lot that went into that because obviously when storms come through, devastating storms like what's, again, I've got family in Western North Carolina, and so my heart goes out because I know we've had some contact with them, and I know the devastation that they are going through right now. But when things like that happen, and what happened with Hurricane E and things like that, there's two scopes of mind, and a lot of people look for the federal government to come in and bail people out, right? What was unique about that situation is within about 36 to 40 hours, we had a meeting with Governor DeSantis, and there was about 7 of us in that meeting from contractors, plus a lot of other, people and dignitaries and stuff outside of that. But there was about 7 contractors in that, and within about 10 days, we had the bridges and everything. We didn't have the bridges be rebuilt, but we had the causeway accessibility back out to Matlacha Island, Pine Island, as well as the availability to get on and off of Sanibel. Within about 10 days, we had both of those completely rebuilt to where we had access points. Now, that doesn't mean that roads were completed, but there was clear accessibility where people could access the islands to get on. And it really came because at the end of the day, the state government stepped in and our governor stepped in and said, all right, government, we're going to get out of the way and we're going to bring in private people that can do the job and do it quickly and efficiently and cost effectively. And it just showed a lot that in 10 days, literally, we cleared out and rebuilt 2 massive causeways that there was nothing there. And now rebuilt access roads to be able to get back out to major civilizations was a huge testament to the people, not just my company, but other companies and people that stand in and do that work to see our communities get put back on the right. So,
well, one of the things that not only do you guys react very well, the codes change every time something like this happens. There's adjustments made. There's things that are learned. One of the great things that our builds that we had in Cape Coral, there was no broken windows. There was no water in any of our homes. And that had a lot to do with the new codes. Can you talk about, base flood elevation and things like that? So what can you tell us about the building code that changed in 2017?
Yeah, so the codes changed in 17 from how some of the structures put to place, and how we make certain attachments in the house and how things are strapped together and strapped down within the building codes of things. So that made things a lot stronger, but all of that has really carried through since Hurricane Andrew back in 91. There's been a big push at looking at how do we build stuff, now, with that, the reality is everybody looks at, why is it expensive? Well, to make these changes can cost more money, right? But at the end of the day, when you have storms that come through and your house is still standing and you don't necessarily even have to pay for a deductible to put stuff back, there's a lot of value that you start to see in the money that you spent up front, even in investment properties, right? Because you've got something that stands. From an elevation perspective, floodplains are always being evaluated and where they're at and what the elevations need to be. And fortunately, we had no houses even remotely underwater. Within a few months after Ian, there was an additional adjustment to the FEMA floodplains, which actually then raised most every floodplain in that area raised an additional foot. So not only did we have nothing even close to being underwater at that point, now since then everything we've been building since the beginning of 23 is even a foot higher now. So that's very encouraging. As we were making our rounds the last couple of days to secure job sites. And, I think we've got close to 70 job sites open and active right now.
Let's get into that in a little bit. But before we move on, the base flood elevation we talk about, the code actually mandates that you build a foot above whatever the base flood elevation is, right?
Correct. Yep. And so that's the interesting thing is the base flood elevations were all raised an additional foot in most areas. And then on top of that, we still have to build at least another foot above that.
What's the wind requirement also?
And that can vary depending on where you're at. You can be 150 to 180 mile an hour, depending on which zone you're in. So of course that's all taken care of within the engineering when we're building houses. Like if you're building down on Fort Myers Beach, you're in a different. Typically you're in a V zone of flooding and a V zone of wind, and so there's definite changes that have to happen to a structure. The places that we're building in Cape Coral, even in Northwest Cape Coral, where you're still closer to the water, because there's so much of a barrier there, we're not in a V situation there. So provides a lot of stability from wind, things like that. Now, that doesn't mean that, as this storm comes through over the next 48 hours or so, that we won't potentially see some high winds. But it won't be anything like you're out on a barrier island being buffeted by those directly,
Can you talk about where you get your updates from people there? Because, we get our information from different sources. By the way, we're going to put some links into the show so that, investors can go ahead and track it the same way we are. But Craig, can you tell us what the latest update has been for Milton?
Most of the things that I'm looking at directly at the National Hurricane Institute at NOAA there. So with that, I follow that. I'm watching that at every one of their major updates. Their major update came out at 5:00 this morning, East Coast Standard Time. So in that, there was no cone change on that. So currently, the center of the cone of uncertainty is still just about 15, 20 miles north of Tampa. So about 95 miles north of where we are. So if the storm stays on that current path, we would be well outside of hurricane force winds, and we would be still having tropical force winds, which could be, 50 to 90 miles an hour. But and I say that kind of shruggingly. Again, it's nothing to have 50, 60 mile an hour winds on a Tuesday afternoon here, So we've talked about that a lot, But the difference in the hurricane force winds and tropical forces, it's a big difference. The storm was downgraded last night in the middle of the night. There was a repositioning of the eye. There was a new eye formed, so it lost some of its integrity, and it dropped back down from a 5. It was classified as a Category 5 as of last night still. Throughout the evening at the 2:00, and then again at the 5:00, it was downgraded back down to a Category 4 storm, just due to the kind of resetting of the storm itself. They're suggesting as it gets back out over to open water off of the Yucatan that it could strengthen again, but then there's a lot of wind shear and things that are coming from off of the mainland of Florida and off the peninsula, and currently where that low pressure system would be going. And so because of that, they're really looking at that will start to deconstruct the storm a little bit and lower that. So everything is back to looking like the storm should make landfall as a Category 3. Now that's still a powerful storm, but it's a long way away from a Category 4 or even a 5. We'll take a Category 3 all day long if you got a choice on it.
Absolutely.
And again, the wind, any structure built in the last 35 years can withstand that kind of wind for the most part. The biggest thing is going to be storm surge, and there really has not been storms of this size coming from directly headed west to east since the 1800s. There was 2 in the 1800s of this size and strength that came from the west. So this is an odd angle that the storm is attacking or is kind of coming to Florida. We've been studying a lot of that, and I've been trying to look at a lot of that of how's that going to affect what we're doing and how we need to prepare differently. So
let's talk about that, Craig.
Okay.
Let's talk about it from a standpoint of just how are people in Florida preparing?
Okay. So one of the biggest things people have to make their decisions as to, are they comfortable staying, or do they feel like they need to leave, right? So there's currently 2 zones. We have what's called evacuation zones, and we always encourage everybody, the state encourages everybody, if you're in coastal areas, know your evacuation zones, right? Because they're going to call out evacuation zones and say, hey, you need to leave, right? So currently, the only zones they're evacuating are Zone A and Zone B. And again, that's from a storm surge perspective. Those are the A is always right on the coast and right up against rivers and waterways, things like that. B's can be a little more inland, but typically low lying stuff. That was again where older developments where they were developing and building streets that weren't as high, right? And then obviously sea, and it becomes more inland, higher levels,
Sure.
things like that. So the biggest thing is people have to know their evacuation zones, and then, if it's mandatory, they've got to get out. If it's not, they have to make the determination for themselves if they feel like they can stay or go, depending on where they're at and their level of tolerance, right? Because a lot of times it's not so much the storm, it's the aftermath in the storm. If we lose power, are they available? Do they have the availability to provide power for themselves? Do they have generators? Do they have things?
It'll take a couple of days for the roads to even be accessible sometimes, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, with Ian, I mean, we were working for days just to be able to get access. I mean, we had power lines down everywhere, power poles were down. I mean, it's a massive operation to start putting things back together again. But the power companies, they do a great job. I mean, I know a lot of people get frustrated with the power companies, but there's there's specific directions that they have to go, and a lot of times people get frustrated saying, well, they were in my neighborhood and they didn't do my lines. Well, there's certain lines that they have to address first, that may be feeder lines before they get off into secondary lines. So it's not that, linemen just pick and choose. There's very definite directions they have to go. And so there's a lot of things that happen in that aftermath. But in the heading up to and the preparation, if you're going to stay, the reality is you got to look and say, okay, are we in flooding prone areas, right? Even for storefronts, things like that, you got to look and say, okay, do parking lots have a tendency to flood? If so, we need to prep and potentially sandbag things, and those type scenarios, right? Same thing for homes, stuff like that. And then you've got to deal with food, water, electricity, preparing for the inevitable if you lose electricity, right? You got to make sure you've got water, you got food, and ways to cook it, things like that. So that's the biggest thing that people in general are looking as to, do they evacuate or not, right? A lot of people that don't have impact windows, they're out putting shutters on, for older houses, they're screwing plywood to them, things like that. Anything just to protect windows, again, to keep from the wind having airborne projectiles breaking windows, things like that, because the most destruction on the house, honestly, from a catastrophic failure of a structure, is really about the changes of pressure in a house, right? So when windows break, not only do you get and there's high winds going on, not only do you get water inside, but when the pressure inside those houses start to change and there's high winds involved, that's when roofs can start to come off, things like that. So protecting the wind or the windows, protecting entrances, making sure that there's no points that things can break, projectiles can break windows. That's a big deal, that you want to protect your structure that way. So there's people out putting up storm shutters and things like that. So
what are you guys doing specifically as a company for the construction sites?
So for construction sites, obviously we've got to go through. We make sure that all of dumpsters are cleaned and emptied and protected. We've got porta potties on every job site, so those have to be tipped over and laid on their side, so that way they don't become sails, right? Because it's little things that you don't think about, right? If we leave that thing standing up, the door opens up, it gets caught by the wind. All of a sudden, you got a 1,100-pound porta potty blowing down through the air and hitting somebody's house and stuff like that. And a simple thing of just literally laying it down on the ground on the door, they typically don't go anywhere at that point, So things like that you got to do. We got to make sure that there's no airborne debris that can be, grabbed by wind, things like that. Obviously, any of the houses that have windows and doors, we make sure those are shut and locked and barricaded, things like that. We use all impact hurricane rated windows and doors. So, once we've got windows and doors on there, I'm really not as concerned about our structures, There were certain houses that we were in the middle of construction and had certain things going, and we actually paused construction several days ago, preparing for the aspect, because we didn't want to be in between certain tasks, and those can actually create a bigger damage, right? So we we were flying some trusses on houses, and we decided not to put the plywood sheathing on those because that creates bigger deflections versus the trusses themselves, bracing them up correctly. Now the wind can blow through them and there's really nothing to be caught. And while we may have some topple over a few things, those can be picked right back up and put back on, right? Versus if we sheathe it and don't get the job finished, then all of a sudden we've got a much bigger problem and create a catastrophe that could potentially damage other people's homes. So while we want to protect our homes that we're building and the products that we're using, we also really want to be good neighbors and make sure we're trying to do everything we can to try to protect the homes around us from anything that would fly off of our job sites.
Now, one of the things that has happened in the last 2 or 3 years is the insurance crisis in both California and Florida. Now, knock on wood, hopefully we don't get too big claims. I know with Ian, I had a roof replaced on my rental, and the insurance company came through and took care of it, and everything was great. All of our sites and builds are protected, correct?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. With everything that we have going, every house that goes under construction in the state of Florida, you got to have builder's risk on it. You have to have liability insurance. So obviously we carry our liabilities, but there's got to be builder's risk. There's, if you're in flood zones, you've got to have flood insurance on it. So everything that we have that's under construction has all of the correct insurance and that is needed and required to be able to sustain storms like this. The insurance game in Florida right now, as well as California, and I believe it's probably going to be the same thing in North Carolina now. It's a battle right now, right? But praise God, we've got 14 new companies that have started writing in the state of Florida this year. So that's been a huge boost to starting to bring back some normalcy of what's happening in the state. So we'll have to wait and see how the storm surge does on this one. I mean, it's calling for big storm surge, and that could definitely do some damage. But we just got to see how this shakes out and where it's at and how much damage it does to be able to determine how we kind of fare out of the insurance side of this one. And it's not about paying now. It's really about what I'm going to is what does it look like 6 months from now? What does that picture for writing look like? So.
Yeah, one of the things I was pleasantly surprised to see was an email yesterday from my insurance company talking about resources and, hey, if you've got a claim, start with us. And It was just refreshing to hear that, that they're not, avoiding it. They're trying to be proactive and give us all the resources that we can, because insurance companies are only good as the ability to pay. I used to work for Aflac, and, Aflac was one of the first companies during 9/11 that said, you know what, although, President Bush declared it an act of war, and a lot of times that will nullify insurance policies, Aflac was the first one who said, we don't care. We're going to pay every single one of those claims. And so to me, that's where companies like that really make their money, is by being there when we need them. So that'll transition to the conversation that I had yesterday with Joanna and Empire Property Management, our property management company. They were all in the office printing out every address with contact from the tenant, contacts for the owners, because there's a possibility that the internet could go out, the power could go out. So they wanted to still have the ability to find where the homes that they were, in charge of managing. They've been in contact with every tenant. They asked every tenant to clean up the properties, take pictures, which is a very important aspect of that. Take pictures, because the before and after will be very helpful in your insurance claims. And with Ian, Joanna and Empire Property Management handled everything. I didn't have a single conversation with my insurance company. She took care of it. She got me all the bids for the roof, and it was so hands off. So another one of those aspects where you look to, the partners that you have in place to be able to help you out and take care of everything that you're doing. And so what it's been real helpful for us is, what people don't know is, unless you went to our boot camp. We've been communicating with folks that went to our boot camps, for the last few days. We communicate
Sure.
through Helene, and we'll continue to communicate. But we thought this was really important that we got on here and, let people know what's going on, boots on the ground. If by the grace of God that we get lucky and it gets downgraded and it isn't, as devastating as it look, especially yesterday. If you listen to any of the news, they're going to sensationalize, and it's a Category 5 and it's the worst storm ever. And we could still hope and pray that it does dissipate and the damage is not as bad as it could be. But the reality is that there's going to be people that they're going to need help. So when those things come across, if I know during Ian, our investors put together, some gift cards, things. There's going to be many ways to help. As we come across some of those opportunities, if it's close to us, we'll post those links on our website going forward, so that if people feel like they want to help, they can.
From an aspect of helping, just like what we're seeing in Western North Carolina right now, the things that are getting done and the main things that are happening because of citizens, just stepping up and caring for one another and wanting to volunteer and wanting to help and wanting to put things into play. So there's definitely going to be a lot of people that will be in need after this storm comes through. We'll see how that shakes out. Obviously, Joey, you know me, I'm very active in our community and our church, not just in business, but with people, right? So, as a company, we've taken a lot of care to make sure that all of our employees are ready. We're staying in contact with them on several times a day to make sure that, everybody's taken care of, and we're putting plans on how we will contact, and once the storm is over, how we contact, because I've got to start and I've got to focus and make sure that I start in our inner circle and start to work out from there, right? Once from there, I'm already been, even though, my personal situation, I've got family members in the hospital. I'm just coming off of bronchitis, things like that. But, I've already been in meetings last night with our church on some strategic planning for communities and how we're going to be preparing and how we're organizing, things like that. So there'll be a lot of information that we'll have over the next few days coming out to be able to start getting out to people that want to help. So we'll definitely do some things to follow up over the next few days after the storm has passed and we're able to evaluate things like that. Because obviously the first thing that we've got to do as a business is we've got to evaluate our internal people to make sure how do we need to take care of them so we can take care of the job we do. Once I'm assured that everybody is safe and protected and that we're able to keep moving from there, then our next plans that we've already been working on is, okay, now how do we go back in and we start addressing the homes? We've got policies of how do we do that and procedures of how do we do that from, we have pictures from before, now we'll have pictures afterwards. What happened with each house? There's a lot of documentation that goes on. And then our team will start to work with that. And then, of course, I'll jump back into a lot of things within the community that we're doing. There's a chance, as you said, I did a lot of search and rescue last time with Ian. We'll see what realm I'm working in this storm, but it's me, I love people and I want to see that we're all safe and sound to the best of our ability and taking care of people. So
yeah, we've had several investors reach out to me via email saying, hey, if there's any way that they can help, please let them know. So they're already thinking about that. Another couple of investors, well, quite a few of them have asked how Bruce is doing. Bruce is actually one of the folks that did choose to step away from his home. So he's nowhere near his home in Sarasota. He's up in Georgia, but I'm sure when he comes back, he'll jump into the efforts wholeheartedly like he did last time. And the last thing I'll say is that Joanna's doing the same thing with our property management. They're going to go ahead and triage the importance of the calls. If there's damage, they'll go visit the most damaged ones first. But every one of our homes will be visited by her team afterwards also. So we've got some good people on the ground there. We'll keep them in our thoughts, keep them in our prayers, and hopefully, we can have the best possible outcome out of all of this, and minimize the impact on folks, because we could use some good news. Craig, thank you for jumping on. I know you got a ton of stuff. I see you working already. Yep. So I'll let you go. You let me know if you need anything, and just I know we'll be in contact. But thank you for jumping on and getting us this as an update. For everybody at home, we're going to go ahead and post this 2 days early. I'll go ahead and make sure this gets out tomorrow. So you'll see our podcast a little bit early this week, so that everybody can get the information before the hurricane makes landfall.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Craig.
We'd also like to thank our gold sponsors: Inland Valley Association of Realtors, Keystone CPA, NorCal RIA, NSD REI, Pasadena Phoebe, Property Radar, The Collective Genius. See isurvivedrealestate.com for event details. For more information on hard money loans, trust deed investing, and upcoming events with the Norris Group, check out thenorrisgroup.com. For more information on passive investing through the DBL Capital Real Estate Investment Fund, please visit dblcapital.com.
The Norris Group originates and services loans in California and Florida under the California DRE license 01219911, Florida Mortgage Lender license 1577, and NMLS license 1623669. For more information on hard money lending, go to thenorrisgroup.com and click the hard money tab.